name is Varun Kumar, and I'm the Production Services intern based out of Kennesaw, and this is my final intern presentation. So I thought I'd start off by giving you guys a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So first off, it's going to be a little bit about myself, then moving into some of my projects, some of the events I attended through the Clorox company, and then finally a little bit of a special thanks to everyone that's helped me out a little bit. So a little bit about myself. Born and raised right outside of DC, I currently attend Virginia Tech, or as I like to frequently say around the Kennesaw office, the real Tech. I'm majoring in chemical engineering with a minor in both chemistry and green engineering. Planning to graduate in spring of 2019, and I love to hang out with my friends and my dogs. And here's a picture of my dog PETA. He's about 9 years old right now, and he's down here in Georgia with me. All right, so some of my projects. I'm going to go into extra detail about both Project Metallica, which is in the Renew Life business, and the Pine Salt Scented Contamination Project, which is in the home care business. And then at the end of my presentation, I'm going to give a little bit of a summary of some of the other projects I worked on. So right into Project Metallica. So the objective of this project was to identify heavy metal and allergen claim issues with VitaQuest products, with VitaQuest being one of our roughly 19 co-factors underneath the Renew Life branch. So traditionally, fibers have the biggest issue with both heavy metal and allergen claim issues. And to give you a little bit more of a perspective into the seriousness of this issue, fibers make up about 3% of the total Renew Life market share portfolio. And while it's important to understand that the scope of this project was to focus on both heavy metal and allergen claim issues, the real issue with allergens is that we lack a reliable testing method. So what that means is that we get a lot of false positives and false negatives when it comes to testing for our allergen-free claims. So because of that, GSS actually took over the allergens portion of this project, and I focused almost entirely on the heavy metals aspect. So when dealing with heavy metals, there's two main regulatory standards that we care about, with the first one being USP, which depending on whether we pass or fail, determines whether we release our inventory into market. And the secondary stricter standard is California Prop 65, which if we fail means we'll have to sticker our product in California with this image. And now while that image isn't good for business, obviously, it's important to understand that the goal of this project is to apply assurance, and actually making sure that we can release our inventory into market. And as you can see in this chart, some of our products are really struggling to stay underneath the easier USP limit. So I actually decided to focus almost entirely on USP for this project to really ensure that we have supply assurance. So given that we're struggling with USP, what can we really do to fix ourselves, fix our products? So first, we have three real options. We can look at sourcing of our raw materials, we can look at changing serving size, and we can look at reformulation. So I'm going to target sourcing of our materials first. So I reached out to the two main fiber providers for VitaQuest, and after a discussion with them, realized that they can't provide us fibers with a low enough heavy metal count to pass USP standards, given our current serving size and formulation with near certainty. So that really only leaves a change in serving size or reformulation as our main options to fit products. So what does changing serving size mean? So what these regulatory standards actually care about is that alongside a balanced diet, our dietary supplements do not give our consumers too much heavy metals without being unhealthy to them. So this leads to a few different ratios that you can use to still create healthy products and be safe to our consumers. So for example, if you had a 10-gram product, you'd have an almost 0.6 ppm allowance of heavy metals within your product, with ppm being the main metric we use to track heavy metals in our inventory. Well, if you had a 2-gram product, you'd have an almost 2 ppm allowance of heavy metals. So you can look at changing serving size to allow different levels of raw materials to be used in your finished product. But it's important to understand that you can't infinitely decrease your serving size, because at some point, you're going to lose all the medical efficacy that's associated with our fiber products. And then finally, reformulation is the least favorable of the three options, as it has the highest internal costs and resources associated with it. So using these different recommendations and approaches, I then looked at the roughly double-digit number of problematic fiber SKUs underneath the VitaQuest branch and created some different recommendations to better ensure supply assurance. So here's an example of a few of my recommendations, and I'm actually going to focus on some of the easier ones first. So this category of recommendations is really for products that are not an issue or have an acceptably low failure rate. So the recommendation is fairly easy for this, and it's simply to make smaller and more frequent batches. Currently, VitaQuest makes a batch roughly every 2 to 3 months, depending on what product we're making. So if we make something that's off spec, that means we have to hold that whole batch in our production facilities for roughly 2 to 3 months until next batch is made, and we can average them into spec. So if we make smaller and more frequent batches, then we'll be holding less product for less time and overall having more cost avoidance. Then next I'm going to look at a little bit more of an aggressive recommendation, and triple fiber is a good example of that. So to give you a little bit more perspective, triple fiber has a roughly 500,000 market sales so far in this fiscal year, but it has a staggering 60% failure rate associated with it. So my recommendation was fairly simple. It was to reduce our serving size from about 11 grams to 7.75 grams, which reduces the failure rate to about 30%. It's important to understand that this still maintains all the positive health benefits associated with our product. And once again, I recommend to make smaller or more frequent batches. That way we're holding off-spec product for less time. It's also important to note that 30% failure rate is definitely not optimal, but given the current business situation and internal resources, that's probably one of the better options we have right now. But that doesn't mean that triple fiber is not an option for reformulation in the future. So the main outcomes of this project right now is that we simply avoid supply risk. We're more likely to release product into market that's still safe and healthy for our consumers, but there's still more that we can do. We can look at better integrating the allergen work that GSS has done, while also looking a little bit more into Prop 65 regulations to avoid stickering our California products. And then after that, we can look to apply some of our learnings to close to 18 other co-packers underneath the Renew Life branch. All right, so now I thought I'd switch gears a little bit and talk about my pine salt scented contamination project, which is a really good example of some of the forest park assistance work I've done throughout my time here. So the objective of this project was fairly simple. It was to figure out the root cause of that consumer noticeable contamination and simply create a recommendation to prevent it from happening again in the future. So one of my first things to do for this project was to start looking at the raw materials in the forest park plant and see if anything was off. And almost immediately, I noticed something was wrong with the sodium lauryl sulfate, otherwise known as SLS, storage tank. So traditionally, SLS is a clear viscous liquid, but it was actually coming out of the storage tank almost amber colored right now, so something was clearly wrong. When the storage tank was drained, we also found a blue-green residue along the heating coils in the storage tank, and there also seemed to be some apparent degradation along the storage tank walls. So looking a little bit deeper into this, the amber-colored SLS seems to suggest some form of rusting from our stainless steel tank, while when the blue-green residue was placed under the microscope, had a fairly waxy composition to it, suggesting metallic contamination. And then this all falls in line with the fact that there's some degradation along the storage tank walls, seeming to suggest that our tank was leaching into our raw materials and causing the instability of finished products. So from there, I then looked into the metallic composition of our storage tank, and then ran a few different titrations on our blue-green residue to see if any of those metallic ions were present. And I found that trace amounts of chromium, nickel, iron, and manganese were found. And right here you can see one of the titrations I ran, with the blue sample being the pre-test, and then the green precipitate and sodium hydroxide being a successful run of one of my titrations. And then, so now that I kind of confirmed that our stainless steel tank was leaching into our raw materials, I needed to figure out why it was happening so I could better prevent it from happening again in the future. So it's important to understand what type of storage tank we're actually dealing with here. So this storage tank is about 42 feet tall, and it also has a 35,000 gallon capacity to it. So it has zone heating associated with it, and what that means is there's a few different zones throughout the tank that are responsible for heating all 35,000 gallons up to the heat range of SLS, which is a pretty tight 85 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, with a maximum heat rating of 120 degrees. So that means if we go above 120 degrees for our SLS, we risk permanently damaging our raw material, potentially leading to the contamination you see in the finished product. But it's important to understand that with the zone heating in 35,000 gallons, it's very likely that our heating coils are reaching a temperature multiple times higher than 120 degrees in order to bring our ambient temperature up to 85 to 110 range. And that extra heat was likely acting as a catalyst between the stainless steel tank and our raw material, causing the leaching and finished product instability. So I then wrote a technical report to share with the Forest Park plant, where I outlined my proposal to install a more controlled heating system to better control our raw material and finished product quality. I also worked on a few other projects during my time here, with probably one of my favorite ones being Project Jade, which is a PPD project. So in this project, I got to work on a lot of testing for different pump materials for our bagging and box dispenser. So by that, I mean I got to run a lot of different stress and environmental condition tests on both silicone and rubber tubing to see which one would fit our product best. In addition to that, I also helped develop an antimicrobial soap and gel formula, of which we're hoping to run validation studies on in the next few weeks. Also had the opportunity to work a little bit more in the home care, laundry, and charcoal business. So here at Clorox, I got to do a lot more than just work. I got to participate in the Burnt Hickory Elementary School Science Night with another intern in SELDP, where we worked with elementary school kids and ran different science demonstrations for them, really getting them excited about science and also teaching them a bit more about Clorox in general. I also participated in the Junior Achievement Finance Day, where we worked with 8th graders and taught them a little bit more about financial stability and better preparing themselves for their future careers. And I also got to volunteer at the Atlanta Science Fair, where we interacted with kids all day and really just got to get them excited about science in general. On top of all of this, I got to go back to Virginia Tech in February and actually get to help recruit the next round of interns joining us here in the fall. In terms of key learnings, I can't say how thankful I am for actually being able to follow a lot of my technical passions and really expand a lot on a lot of the things I've learned in classwork, but also really be exposed to many skills and fields that I would have never been exposed through my bookwork. I also had the opportunity to really work on my leadership and take ownership in projects in a way that I never have before, while also being able to work on my communication, especially given the fact that Production Services works with so many different outlets of business within Clorox. So I was really able to learn how to best communicate with different organizations within the company and out there. In terms of special thanks, I'd like to give a very special thanks to my mentor, Smita. She really served as an excellent role model and mentor throughout this entire time, answered so many questions I had, taught me so much, and was just such a great person to work with overall. I'd like to also thank everyone on the slide and also off the slide for helping create such a great work environment here at Clorox, and it's really something that I'd love to come back to if given the chance. Any questions? Yeah.
So the SLS, so you're saying that the temperature was raised, the temperature driving the process, or was it distillate?
It was the temperatures. So the temperature was causing the stainless steel to react with the SLS because at the higher temperature, the SLS was becoming unstable.
So Varun, for some of your metals analysis, did you do that work yourself, or did you use resources in California, or how did you do that?
So Alf and I actually, in the Production Services lab in Kennesaw, ran a lot of those titrations ourselves.
Okay.
And then STEP, in our raw material provider, actually had a third-party analysis which confirmed our results. Thanks.